So ladies and gentlemen, I will start my speech with a point of rebuttal. So I'm going to oppose one thing that the government said is when the government said that the company will take resources that are in the outskirts. And why we oppose this? Because if this happen in the long term, it will impact on first society, and the second is impact on the company, and the last thing is on environmental impact. So first aspect that I'm going to talk about is the impact on society, because there will be declining of welfare in family that live near the company. Because why? So first analysis, the level of environmental will be decreased, or like environmental quality will be decreased. Like for example, company will produce a waste in the form of water, air, or other things. And this waste will impact the environment because they bring a negative impact, like for example, waste pollution or disturbing the ecosystem, because the environment that animals have to live in will be damaged. And second impact that I'm going to talk about is the impact on the company. The company will have like more responsibilities. Like this responsibility comes from the pre-production or production and post-production processes. And this responsibility usually takes like in the form of protecting the ecosystem and the environmental in which production and the management takes places. And if this company fails to maintain stability and environmental health, it is considered to have pushed the people that live near the company to uncomfortable and prosperous situation. Because of that, company must have to apply like a design management that carried out efficiently as possible, and that's why company like having more burden and more responsibility, and not only have to manage the company itself, but also the quality of the environment. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about is the environmental impact. Environmental pollution will certainly increase if the types of product from example like attractive industry cannot be renewed. In addition to that, product waste that cannot be managed optimally can also create opportunity for uncontrolled natural damages. So the goal that we want to give in this debate is we want people to be paid the amount that they deserve according to the regional wage standard, which the national wage standard cannot give. And moving on to my point of argument, why using regional wage standard will bring more betterment than using the national wage standard. So point of mechanism that I'm going to talk about is, first of all, people will be paid according to their job. For example, like a programmer will have more salary than a farmer because programmers takes a lot of brain power, and it is not fair to give the same salary to programmer as those who are farmer. Because why? Because programmer have to go to the college, right, and get a bachelor degree in order to be qualified as a programmer. So it is not fair for us to give the same salary to programmer and a farmer. And programmer have to, in order to get the job, programmer have to get a bachelor degree, which farmer doesn't need to go to school, for example. That's why it is justifiable for us to give like a profession that require higher education to give more salary, rather than a profession that require not high level education. That's why it is justifiable to do so. And moving on to my second point, why it is better to use regional wage standards. So first point that I'm going to talk about is the living cost of people that live in rural area will be increased if using using the national wage standard, which the regional wage standard cannot do. Because why? Because there is no guarantee whether or not these people would have the same salary as using the national wage standard, because people already used to living cost which is offered by the regional wage standards. And imagine these people that live in Jogja, for example, when the living cost is not as much as other region, for example like Jakarta, and suddenly these people that live in Jogja have to adjust to the situation if we use the national wage standard. And although will be relatively the same when it comes to buy food, for example, because not only the price that went up but also the salary of people. And this is bad, ladies and gentlemen, because why? Because not many people will adapt well into this kind of situation. Like usually there is always some people saying that or thinking that why does the government raise the price of food, or did the government want to kill us secretly or something like that. And another point that I'm like to talk about is when young people will be more passionate about pursue a higher education if we're using the regional wage standard. And the thing is that when people in the national wage standard, like the condition when people use the national wage standard, like every profession have the same salary, and that's not the case in our side of the house, because profession that require a high education will have more salary than the rest of the profession that doesn't require a high education. For example, like a doctor have a high salary rather than a farmer, right? Because it takes a lot of time and effort for people to be qualified as a doctor. But when it comes to farmer, for example, everyone can be farmer. Because why? Because it is a job that doesn't require a lot of time and effort like the doctor does. And disclaimer, we're not saying that being a farmer is bad because they don't require educational skills, but compared to profession that requires a high educational, it is not fair to give the same amount of salary because they require a bachelor degree that it takes a lot of money to get and a lot of effort. That's why we say that it is okay for us to give the same salary, to give the different salary for a profession according to the education that the profession have to get in order to be qualified as workers. And if this happen, and then young people will tend to pursue a high education, because why? Because they believe that this will make them to earn like a high level salary rather than not pursue any kind of education at all. And that's why we believe that using regional wage standard will bring more betterment than using the national wage standard. That's why we prefer to oppose. Thank you.